Did you ever notice that everyone speaks the same language in the lands between? At first, I didn't give this a second thought, but then the DLC came out and it added multiple allusions to the famous story of the Tower of Babel. According to the spiral tree seal, the majesty of the White Tower, stretching to reach the gods, even inspired a secret faith in the invaders, the people of the Erdtree. As for the tower itself, the spiral tower in Enir-Ilim is modeled after Peter Bruegel's famous depictions of the Tower of Babel. This is even clearer if you compare those paintings with the sacred tower painting found in the DLC, and that painting is necessary to acquire the spiral tree seal. In addition, the incantation Spira tells us that the spiral is a normalized crucible current that one day will form a column that stretches to the gods. So there is both a tower that reaches the gods, while the crucible will do the same in the future. In addition, the etymology behind the name Babel is fascinating. Babel comes from the Hebrew balal, which is usually translated as confusion or mix-up. And in fact, the name Babel is often linked to the Akkadian word for Babylon, Bab-Elam, which can be translated as the Gate of God. And in Shadow of the Erdtree, we find the divine gateway on top of Enir-Ilim. Since the Tower of Babel is fairly short, let's go over it in full. In the book of Genesis, the Tower of Babel happens right after the Great Flood. This was a time when the whole earth had one language and one speech.
And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, "Indeed the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth.
For clarity, I'd like to point out that in the book of Genesis, God doesn't destroy the tower per se. Construction just stopped for building the city, and presumably the tower as well. Now, one of the most common interpretations of the Tower of Babel is that the builders' desire to make a name for themselves was a form of pride. As one scholar noted, in the ancient Near East, this would have been seen as an act of hubris. It would be clear to an ancient reader that the humans were defacing the image of God and were, in essence, scratching off the name of God and replacing it with their own name. In addition, the Tower of Babel, representing pride and perhaps even usurping God, is also a clear parallel to the original sin committed in the Garden of Eden. If you're curious about original sin, I cover original sin both as the Christian doctrine and as a piece of Elden Ring lore in a separate video. But while the book of Genesis is perhaps the most well-known account of the Tower of Babel, there are other sources we can turn to. For instance, there's the Book of Jubilees, which is excluded from the Catholic and Protestant Bible, but is considered canon by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. In that account, we get some additional lore about the Tower of Babel. There, the builders hoped that building the city and the tower would let them ascend into heaven. We also learn that the construction lasted for over 43 years, with the tower reaching over 5,400 cubits, or more than 8,000 feet tall. That's roughly 2.5 kilometers to my viewers who don't use freedom units. And in the Book of Jubilees, God confounds the language of the children of men and sends a mighty wind to destroy the tower. The account from the Book of Jubilees also makes clearer a parallel to one of the most famous miracles after the resurrection of Christ. In the Acts of the Apostles, on the day of Pentecost, a mighty wind comes rushing out of heaven and fills the apostles with the Holy Spirit, which let them speak with other tongues. And while the apostles preached, crowds heard them, speaking in our own tongues the wonderful works of God. The pairing of Babel and Pentecost shows that God has the power both to splinter and to unify language. Then in the 1st century, Historian Flavius Josephus gave multiple motives for why the Tower of Babel was built. He also connected the Tower of Babel to King Nimrod and the city of Babylon. According to Josephus, Nimrod excited the people to such an affront and contempt of God. Josephus also wrote that Nimrod would be revenged on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers.
It's a big day. We're gonna kill God.
Come again?
We're gonna sneak up there and kill him. Mob style. Just whack his ass.
Can I kill God?
Fuck off, Summer.
With all of this in mind, let's get back to Elden Ring. I think Elden Ring has an inversion of the Tower of Babel story. Here, the tower was successfully built and continued to exist. But unlike in the Book of Genesis and other accounts, in Shadow of the Erdtree, there was no splintering of language. This would explain why everyone in the lands between speaks the same language, albeit with noticeable dialects.
The help is very much appreciated, even from a Tarnished.
In that forsaken place, blood must spill. The blood of your fellows, the Erdtree faithful.
And it's not limited to humans.
What'd you go and do that for?
It pains me so, but he must be neutralized.
And so do dogs like Blythe, Malakath, and Muriel. So I do think it's fascinating that we don't really need an interpreter in the lands between. But then I remember that's not entirely accurate. There is in fact at least one language that requires an interpreter, the language of the fingers. According to the Two Fingers heirloom, fingers cannot speak, yet these were eloquent. Persistently did they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. Thus did we gain the words of our faith. Meanwhile, the cipher Pata is comprised of a formless sequence of ciphers. The furtive inscription appears to hang in the air, the language of light spoken by the two fingers. So unlike in the Book of Genesis, where God confused the language of all the earth, I believe the fingers limited teaching their language to a fingerful of people. At the Round Table Hold, Enia translates the gesticulations of the two fingers.
I interpret the words of the fingers, envoys to the greater will. Look there. The fingers tremble to welcome you, Shardbearer. Let their wisdom wash over you.
Likewise, if you do Hayeda's questline, she becomes a finger maiden to the three fingers.
I have touched them. The words of the three fingers. As your maiden, allow me to divine them.
And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Korhin, who acts as a scribe to
the ever-brilliant Gold Mask.
While I frantically attempt to record his wisdom, the movement of his finger, and though I am yet to comprehend even the daintiest morsel of his wisdom, I know that this is my life's calling. The Golden Order has bestowed me, talentless as I am, the great duty of documentarian.
Fun fact, Korhin is a masculine version of the Greek word korin, which means maiden, and that's a fitting name since Korhin is effectively Goldmask's finger maiden who can interpret
the rhythm and calculus of his finger.
The additional motives attested to by Josephus could also line up with the game's lore. Tarnished Archaeologist has a fascinating theory that the stone coffins we find in the Land of Shadow were actually arks built to survive a deluge of fire. And he links the arks with the famous story of the Great Flood found in both the Bible and Mesopotamian myths. So here I wonder if the tower in Enir-Ilim was built after this great deluge as a safe harbor. Meanwhile, Nimrod and the builders' vow to take revengeance against God immediately made me think of Bernal.
O greater will, hear my voice. I am the recusant Bernal, inheritor of my brother's will, and you will fall to my blade. We refuse to become your pawns. Consider this fair warning.
In fact, Bernal is one of the only characters that even references the Greater Will by name. So that makes him calling out the Greater Will even more significant. The DLC also lets us see Bernal in a whole new light. Bernal is able to visit Farum Azula, where, like Enir-Ilim in Philadelphia, it's always sunny. What's more, he wears the Beast Champion set, which may be connected to the Horn-Scent practice of invoking divine beasts. The beasts, their eyes and ears covered, represent an oath: see nothing, hear nothing, doubt nothing, and carry on, along the path set in stone. Beasts are drawn to champions and to lords, and this armor befits a champion worthy of becoming a lord, and that is what Bernal was, until his maiden threw herself into the fire. Alas, that is a story for another time. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know what Yens think.